Several years ago, I wrote a book, Making Life Matter, on the principle that in a world of fast-paced schedules and priorities, conversations about the things that make for a life well lived are a rarity and a luxury. These words and phrases to live by that made up my life, most having to do with the daily pace of life and how they hold in themselves the way to make our choices more significant. That the everyday, simple steps, most shown to me by my grandfather, who played a very significant role in my life, have shown me how to make life matter. Now, my prayer for you is that through these words to live by, you will find a glimpse of what it means to make your life matter to God's kingdom, and how to embrace the small joys in every day, and how that matters so much. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to You Matter Podcast. I'm Shane Stanford. We are in our second our second week of going through the principles of making life matter. It comes from this book. I wrote this book about 11 years ago. This has been my theme. I explained last time that I got that phrase, making life matter, from a conversation I had with my grandfather, and what an important crossroads that was for me and for the life and decisions that I would have to lead and to make. We talked about three sayings last week. I want to talk about the three more sayings that are in the book that I think are so important to the lessons that I learned from him growing up. The first one is, if you break it, you buy it. And I know there's the phrase out there, if you break it, you own it. But he wanted to make the point that it was a little bit more than that. You don't just get ownership to something just because you break it. I think sometimes people feel like they can treat or handle something any way they want because then they get ownership of it. He wanted you to know that if you break it, you have to buy it. There has to be an outlay of something, whether it's your pride or whether your skill or your money or your time, whatever it might be, that if you are going to put yourself and whatever it is that you are dealing with in jeopardy, and you're not being careful with it, you're not taking time to care for it, then if you break it, if something goes wrong, then you have to then put an outlay. You have to have some expenditure that allows for you to take ownership of that. The reason I think that is such an important conversation for us today is that I've seen a lot of situations where people just don't take care with things anymore. They treat people based from a self-centered point of view, an attitude that leads to nothing but chaos and confusion. And we do not need more chaos and confusion in this world. I think what has to happen is people have to take responsibility and take ownership on the front end of whatever it is that they're dealing with. I'll give you an example of that. I remember when I was a small child that I was given a family heirloom. It was a piece of pottery, like something that was very important to my mother's grandmother. And so it was very important to my mom. And I remember I wanted it. I remember I was just a small child. We saw it in the old family home and they were giving stuff away. And that's what I wanted. And I remember my mom saying to me, okay, if you're going to take care of this, you need to make sure you handle it with care, that you're responsible for it. Are you ready for this responsibility? And it was pretty valuable according to the world standards of the world, and also according to the standards of our family. And I remember for about a year later, I was doing something in my room. I was, horsing around and hit the table that it was on, and it fell off and broke one little part off. It didn't damage it in any other way. And I'm not sure it would have taken time for people to notice that it was even broken, but I knew it was broken, and I knew that my mother was going to know it was broken. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, I have failed, not just in terms of taking care of this, but I've failed in terms of the responsibility that my mother had shown confidence in. So when I went to her, I remember I thought she was just going to be angry and I was just going to get in so much trouble. And she just simply told me a story about a time when she was caring for, she had been given a pony when she was a little girl. And as she was caring for this pony, she got tired of having to go out and feed it and groom it and make sure it was okay. And several days went by, and when she went out, the pony was gone. And she was just beside herself because the pony was not there. And she ran back to the house with tears in her eyes and told her mom what was going on. And her mom said, "Oh, yes, the neighbor came and got it, because if you're not going to take care of it, I needed someone who would." And that story stuck with me because my grandmother was always a very loving, caring person. But it meant something to her that if you're going to take responsibility for something, you need to understand you're going to invest yourself in that responsibility. I think where we miss it in the world today is people don't take responsibility for their actions. They don't take responsibility for their concerns and for the things that they've been given care of. And what a difference it would make in this world if we would do that. When I think about the next one is very important to me because it's a phrase that I heard from my father's mother a good bit, and she was married to my grandfather that I've been talking about these last couple of weeks, and that was, we all need a place. And I just did not understand. Of course, we had a place. We had the house that had the big oak tree out to the side, and we would all go play golf at a certain place, and we liked to go to a certain restaurant. A catfish shack is what it was called, out in the middle of nowhere, over by a river. There we had these places in our life. I took them for granted, and I'll tell you when I finally realized the importance of this was right before I wrote this book. I took a trip down to the area where my grandparents lived. It was called Spring Hill. It's a wonderful, beautiful little community that has some rolling hills. It has beautiful fields and wonderful trees. It's just a beautiful display of nature. And I remember the couple of things struck with me. I remember thinking, wow, that church is not nearly as big as I remember it being. Or the house, that tree's not nearly as large as I thought it was. But as I stood there for a while, I realized that, when we're younger, we do take for granted the places in our life. We take for granted the houses and the homes and the rooms and the opportunity to feel like we belong somewhere. We take that for granted a lot of times. And it's not until you've had to leave home, it's not until you've had to relocate or begin a new chapter in your life, I think, that you fully address and take hold of the places that have meant so much to you. I remember in college, we had to write an essay about the five most important places in our life. Two of them were golf courses. That should tell you something about my upbringing. But the one was my grandparents' house. The other was a little house that was back off the hills in some of my uncle's land. And I remember as a child, we would walk down there, and because it was empty most of the time, all the kids would play, the cousins would all play there. And I remember we had a blast. We played everything from war to Pioneer, you name it. We loved that old cabin back in the woods. I went back there not too many years before this book was done, and it had burned down. And I had not been there in years and years and years. And I stood there and thought about how this place represented so many of my memories, represented so many of the relationships. And over that period of time, of the five people that would play together at that little old cabin back there, two of them had passed away because of drug overdoses. One of them had gone off to war, had been deployed twice, and had seen some horrific things. Another one of them had gotten married and gotten divorced even at that young age. And as I thought about our lives, wouldn't it have been easy, I thought to myself, if we could just transport ourselves back to that place in time? Oh, how we did not really appreciate what we had in that moment, in that place. Well, the places of our lives are simply opportunities. They're doorways to memories. And that's what I realized, is that you look at those places, you look at those as opportunities for you to feel certain things and to remember certain things and to retain the value of certain things. Now, I know for a lot of people, places open the doors to hurt memories. And I'll never forget, I went with a member of my congregation. She was in a recovery program. We discovered there was a significant amount of sexual abuse as she was a child growing up. And I remember one of the things she wanted to do was go back to the old house in this little small town in southern Mississippi where she had grown up and where a lot of that abuse had taken place. And I checked out with our counselors that we used on our referral system, and they said, yes, that we needed to make sure that someone went with her. And so I asked her who she wanted to go with her, and she picked me. And I thought, okay, here we go. And we drove, it seemed forever, out into the farmland of and the back country of southern Mississippi until we came outside of a town called Bassfield. Bassfield's a little small town in southern Mississippi. And we drove down this long dirt road. And before we could even turn the corner, I could see the tears welling up in her eyes. And she said, I don't think I can do this. And I said, no, we're on our way. You can do this. And as we got closer to the house, I remember it looked like she was just about to come undone. And then her emotion shifted the moment she saw the house. And I could tell she had anger, and she got out of the car. And as she walked towards the house, she was picking up rocks and stones and throwing it at that house. The house was abandoned at the time. And I did not know that she had brought a baseball bat with her and put it in the trunk of the car, and she'd gotten it out of the car. And she went and did a number on the windows and the doors of this house. I don't recommend you doing this, but what she was doing was taking control of the place and the memories that had caused her so much pain. And it was the first time that she had ever felt in her life that she had the ability to fight back. And I understood that at that point. I understood what she was feeling and why that feeling was so difficult for her. As I think back on that day, and now having known her for many years now, I think about the strength that she has now exhibited as a mother and now a grandmother, and how important that time at that house was. That place represented all of the struggles and the baggage of her life, and she wanted to make sure that that place didn't define her. But it was a doorway to her healing, and that's very important to remember, because I've had the opposite happen in my life. As I said, I went and visited my grandparents' house, and the family that's living there now is just a wonderful, sweet family. And this is 20 years ago, my goodness. And I went up to the door and I knocked on the door and I told them who I was, and they knew our family. They had bought it from my aunt and uncle. And I said, would you mind if I come look at the front room where the television used to be? And that's where my grandfather and I would sit. It was a long room. He would sit at one end in his leather recliner, and I would lay on the floor, in front of the fireplace, and we would watch golf, or we would watch all kinds of things on television. And I just stood there a moment, and I remember getting that feeling that I would get when I was a little boy in that place. And it was a time of great reassurance for me that things had been valuable and valid as I had experienced them in my life. We all need a place, and that is a very, very important thing. And then as I get to the third saying about making life matter, this is one that I remember my grandfather didn't use it in this phrase. I came up with the phrase, but he always talked about this particular concept. He says, knowing when enough is enough and knowing it's not you. And what he meant by that is that's really 2 points he's trying to make. One is that a lot of us do not slow down enough to know when enough is enough. And the reason this causes so many problems is usually when we're trying to manage a particular resource or emotion or relationship. We can oftentimes allow where we spend more money than we have, where we spend too much time on a relationship that really is not healthy for us, or we spend time in terms of effort and time on a task that really is not productive. And I know we all do it, and we've all done it. But the real key to maturity, I think, in that circumstance is knowing when enough is enough and understanding the power of what that line is in our life. It's hard for me to say no. If I come across a situation or a circumstance that I'm not fond of, I try to fix it. And I've done that my whole life. And do you know how unproductive that is? Because there's certain things you can't fix. And usually what I do is just dig a deeper hole than what the problem was, even. Because I'm trying to fix it, I'm trying to make it right. And I do that in particular in the relationships in my life. The idea of knowing when enough is enough. I'll give you some background. I wrote an article on this about 20 years ago about stewardship, and that one of the things that I found that people did not do well was managing their money, and that line of enough, whatever it might be, when do you know enough is enough in that circumstance of your life, and you're able to draw that line and trust that is enough. And I found that it's very simple. Sometimes I call it just when I say something is just a math problem, I'm not trying to be emotional about it. I'm not trying to over contextualize it. I'm just simply saying whatever you're expending is more than you possess. And whether that's your finances or relationship capital or your gifting, that only leads to pain and brokenness in so many ways. So knowing when enough is enough. But the more important principle of that, which is where we end up today, is knowing that you are not enough. And ultimately, coming to that conclusion is probably the most valuable thing that someone ever taught me, was that, the enough in our life, in terms of managing resources, we have to learn how to be good managers. But this is the parable of the manager, if you remember in the Gospels, where Jesus is saying, you can be a good manager, but you can still miss the meaning of what and why you're managing this, and that you are ultimately responsible to the landowner in the parable. And so to be a good manager, you take responsibility for that which has been given for you. So that's number one. When is enough enough? But you are not enough. You are not the final say, that ultimately you need a Lord and a Savior and a friend in Jesus Christ. And the idea that we can solve all our problems, that we can balance all of our imbalances, that we can deal with all of our struggles and uphill battles on our own is really a great lie of the adversary. And I mean it very particularly, that Satan loves to distract us. I've said this statement many, many times. Satan never needs to destroy you or devour you. He just needs to distract you, and you'll do the rest of his work for him. Keep in mind, the adversary is lazy. We learn that in the Bible. The least amount of energy that he can expend in order to get you to take an unhealthy road or to make a bad decision, he's going to expend the very minimum amount of energy. And if he can get you to be distracted, that you make those decisions and head down those roads on your own, then he's won. Understanding the power of where you go to fill in the blanks in your life. That's the way that I've often counseled people. Do you feel like there are things missing in your life? And I've never had a situation in counseling where someone didn't go, yes, I'm missing I'm here in this relationship, or I'm missing this amount of focus, or I'm missing this type of commitment. And they can, and I said, so what are you going to fill in the blanks of those missing things with? Are you going to fill in missing relationships or bad relationships with drugs, with alcohol? Are you going to fill it in with other bad relationships? Or in terms of commitment and initiative? I've heard this from so many people who are very, very talented, but they just don't have any initiative. And therefore they wonder why they can't accomplish the things in their life that they feel like that they're able to do. And a lot of times it just comes from hard work and sacrifice, knowing that you are not enough, and therefore there will have to be accommodations made. Well, friends, my wife is a special ed PhD and talks about accommodations. We are all in terms of special consideration when it comes to our spiritual life. We are all inadequate when it comes to what we need, and therefore how important it is for us to take time to find the accommodations that God has made to us through Jesus, which is Jesus Christ. He filled in the blanks of the missing elements of our life and gave us a chance to be able to begin again. Friends, you'll notice today I don't have my glasses on. I've got bags under my eyes. I'm looking old and just really broken down. And I did that on purpose because I know a lot of times we like to hide over things. We like to, pretend like some things don't exist or that maybe things look better than they are. Sometimes we are just tired. Sometimes we are just at the end of our rope. Sometimes we are just worn down. And that's okay because on this journey, God provides us with certain elements and ways for us to experience what it means for us to be the children of God. And therefore, I would encourage you to think about the things in your life that you take care of, the things in your life that have been given to you. Are you treating them well? And if they broke, are you prepared to do what is necessary to restore them? Relationships are a lot of times the most fragile, valuable things in our lives, and yet we treat them like we would throw a piece of crystal across the room. Do you have a place? Or do you treat and see the places of your life as doorways to good things instead of doorways to not so good things? And if they're not so good things, deal with it. Deal with those places in your life so that you can find a place of peace and comfort. And then finally, I ask you the question about where is enough in your life? What is the line in your life? And do you understand that at a certain point, none of us are enough? I pray that you will take these principles like you did last week and maybe just think on them, put them in your heart, and ask for God to show you something new. It is my joy to be able to share the things that I've worked through in my life and the things that have meant so much to me. I love you. Go into the world and be salt and light. Why? Because you matter. God bless you.